Hi everybody, this is Craig Tanner for the Mindful Eye and the Daily Critique. This is another question-based critique. Today's image was created by Patty, who is an intermediate photographer from New Zealand. I'm going to paraphrase Patty's backstory here so I can tell you her main subject, and then we'll get to her question in just a second. Patty was unfortunately in February of 2011 in the Christchurch earthquake in New Zealand. Just want to take this chance to say how sorry I am that anybody had to go through that. We have quite a few TME members that are in New Zealand, so just really sorry that people had to go through that. Very happy that Patty and her family are physically okay. I know her house was damaged, and I just hope that those kinds of things can come back and be rebuilt. Patty said it's a very difficult time and this very heavy, dark time, and that is really the subject of this picture. She photographed a wilted flower on the counter that portrayed how she was feeling in the aftermath of the quake cleanup, and then she double exposed that inside of the camera with the face of this grandfather clock that we're seeing sort of in the background of the image. And that's actually a clock that she owned that stopped from the jolt of the earthquake. And under questions, Patty says that ultimately when she finished this, she felt like the image may be too warm to convey the heavy, dark mood of her feeling. And she wondered about would a monochrome or bluish tone or maybe a split tone have been better to convey a darker mood. And so let's get into it and let's talk about the question here. Interesting thing about Patty's question for me is that when I look at the color that is dominating in this image, I do get a sense of yellow, but not the pure or normal hue of yellow, which most of us know is a very energizing color. Yellow tends to give us energy, it tends to make us feel good, it tends to be a very boundless, upbeat, energizing color idea. But when I look at the way Patty has presented this, it really doesn't matter where I look. I don't get so much of a sense of yellow as a pure color idea. I get more of a sense of a darker amber. And so one of the potentially very powerful takeaways of looking at Patty's image and being inspired by the creative work that she's done here is when we do move away from normal hues, we break normal hues with things like black or other color ideas, that we can start to push into emotional territory that is different or extraordinary. And for me, this sort of antiqued or patinaed or amber feeling of yellow really does go along with the heavier mood. So much of the time when we think about taking a color like yellow and fading it or making it darker, antiquing it, it does start to make us think about time. And then when you add in this really beautiful juxtaposition of the clock in the background, to me it really starts to push in the direction that Patty is going for. So much of the time it is the concept of time that makes us feel heavy. When we're thinking about the past or we're making up stories about the future, it can be very heavy and it can make us unhappy. And so much of the time, if somebody's trying to help us just to be happy, one of the first things they're doing is they're trying to get us to wake up into the moment. And for me, when I look at this, it's not just the things that I've already talked about. There are other things that are really working well relative to what Patty is trying to convey. I think there's a tension and a heaviness in combining some of these qualities of line and shapes that are being implied with the flower and then the circle of the clock. I think that creates tension. I think having the black and the negative space here, we can look at the histogram here and see that these are pure blacks in the negative space. Not only that, you have the black numbering on the face of the clock, other areas that have gone to pure black. Does a couple of things from a psychological standpoint. It's not just a single color idea, it's color combinations that have a lot of emotional weight. Yellow and black and nature together start to push away from the bright energy of yellow. When you combine these two concepts, this starts to be a warning. So much of the time in nature has a very, very different psychological weight. And then just all of this black. Black is very heavy. It's the combination of all of the colors on the color wheel. So it implies a heaviness, not only of the weight of all the color frequencies and color ideas. Black is the color of death. And black is a color concept that tends to really push us into either a very contemplative space where we slow down, sort of like empty space that we can move into, or it can to push us literally towards a place that is dark and moods that are lower energy and very heavy. And so many different things for me are really working in a beautiful way. I love the quality of light as it moves across this image. I love the way the flower is pointed down. It's not just the concept of a wilted flower, it's a broken flower. It's pointing in the opposite direction, down, away from the light. The light is sort of hitting the outside of the flower, but the quality of light on the vase and the flowers really driving a beautiful sense of depth. I love the overlay here, being able to see the number through the water and how it really gives us a sense of these things. So blending in a beautiful way. I love everything about this. There's really only one thing that I wanted to talk about today. In addition to the color ideas that I've already talked about that could be a powerful takeaway, this is a good image today to consider something that we rarely consider on the Daily Critique, and that is how you present your image. I mean, we could do a whole workshop on this, so I just really want to encourage you to think about one idea today, and then you could have other ideas that you could add to the thread in the comments for this video. So many different things to think about in presenting an image. One very powerful thing to think about is that some images are going to look great printed very big. Some images are going to look great printed very small, and then the framing and the negative space and the framing itself that we create around the image can be very powerful. A lot of times it can work very well for images where we want to pull the viewer in a powerful way and have them move in and be very affected by something like these images. In an emotional way can be very powerful to make the image itself or the photograph very small, make the canvas very big. And that's an option that I might consider to present this image. I'll show you what I'm talking about. Let me first make this smaller, and then I'll show you a version of the image where I essentially extended the canvas, and I chose black to do that so that we end up with a lot more negative space around this that is black. And then from here, if I was going to put this up somewhere on a wall and turn this into a piece of decorative art that's hanging somewhere, I would probably mount this flush on very thick gator board. And then if I wanted to glaze it, put glass on it, the glass would be cut to the same size, and I might just use clips. In other words, I personally would not want to add a frame. There's such a hard edge around the image itself now that's inside of this negative space that I'd really just like for the edge of the print to be the end of it. But I really like the idea of adding a lot more black. For all the reasons that we already mentioned, the black is very heavy, it's contemplative, and it starts to push down on this, but it gives the viewer this negative space of the black to go out and be contemplative. And if we presented like this, it would draw the viewer in to get closer to this instead of having the wall or some white mat or something that might change the energy. As they get very close to this, they start to, as the viewer, be enveloped by all of this dark. And that could have a very, very powerful effect in terms of pushing the viewer in the direction that Patty is going for. And so it's a really neat image to look at today, and just to consider how big this creative process is. It starts so much of the time, powerful images with a feeling. And I just applaud Patty for basically, I feel like I don't know this for sure because hopefully we'll see Patty in the fall at another workshop. Haven't talked to her on the phone about going through the earthquake, but from her backstory it sounds like she has partially processed what has happened through her artwork. And I think that is one of the more amazing things about being an artist. It is a place that we can go when very, very strong emotions, particularly ones that are troubling or maybe having an effect on us, then we can have this cathartic process of expressing that through our art. It's a great image to think about that today. So from the very beginning of our process, this idea, if we want people to feel things when they look at our pictures, to be brave enough and bold enough to let our emotions drive the art that we make, come from an emotional place instead of something that's more cold or technical or disconnected. And also on the back end, to consider everything, not just the image that we choose, not just Photoshop, but then how we present the image and the effect that that can have, and can have an enormous effect. I want to say a big thank you to Patty for sharing this image with us today. Here at the end, I just want to go back to her original interpretation. Big thank you to you for being here. Would love to hear your feedback about the video. Hope to see you again very soon on the Mindful Eye.